Before I tell this, I need to say something strange happened to me while working at a wind farm in West Texas. And even now, I'm not sure how much of it was real. I worked as a turbine maintenance technician, which meant climbing inside those giant white towers you see spinning slowly across empty land. Most days, the only sounds were wind, metal, and the low mechanical hum of the turbines turning against the sky. But one afternoon, I heard something inside one of those towers that wasn't mechanical. It sounded like voices. Before I continue, take 2 seconds to like this video and subscribe to the channel Unblinking. If you enjoy slow, disturbing horror stories that stay with you long after the video ends, it really helps the channel grow. And you won't miss the next story that might be even stranger than this one. Now, let me explain what happened inside turbine number 17. The wind farm where I worked stretched across miles of flatland where the horizon felt endless. Hundreds of turbines stood in long rows like silent giants, each one taller than a 20-story building. When the wind was strong, the entire place sounded like a distant ocean made of steel. My job was simple on paper. Climb the tower, check the internal systems, record the readings, and climb back down. Most technicians work in pairs, but that week we were short-staffed, so I was assigned a solo inspection route. I remember the exact day because the sky was perfectly clear, and the turbines were spinning slower than usual. It was around late afternoon, maybe 4:30, when I reached turbine number 17. From the outside, it looked like every other turbine. White tower, long blades, faint humming vibration running through the steel structure. I unlocked the maintenance hatch at the base and stepped inside. The inside of a wind turbine is narrow and hollow. A ladder runs straight up through the center of the tower for nearly 200 feet. Above you is darkness and machinery. Below you is a small round floor with electrical cabinets and tool mounts. When the door closes, the wind noise disappears almost completely. All you hear is the mechanical pulse of the generator and the quiet creaking of the tower shifting with the wind. That day, something felt slightly different the moment I stepped inside. The air felt colder, not freezing, just strangely cool compared to the heat outside. I remember pausing for a moment, listening. There was the usual humming vibration, the faint whir of rotating components. But underneath it, very faintly, I thought I heard something else, a sound that didn't belong to the machine. At first I assumed it was the wind echoing through the tower. Wind farms make strange noises sometimes. Metal can carry sound in weird ways. Still, I stood there for a few seconds trying to figure out what it was. Then I climbed the ladder. The climb inside a turbine takes several minutes. You move slowly, stopping at small platforms along the way to catch your breath. About halfway up, I heard the sound again. Whisper. So quiet, I almost thought it came from inside my own head. I froze on the ladder and looked down. The tower below me was empty. The hatch door was still closed. I waited. Nothing happened. Just the hum of the turbine above. I told myself it was the wind. When you work around heavy machinery all day, your brain starts turning random noises into patterns. That's normal. At least, that. What I believed then, I kept climbing. The second time I heard it, I was near the top platform just below the nacelle, where the generator sits. This time, the sound was clearer. It wasn't wind. It sounded like someone speaking very quietly. Not a single voice, several voices, all talking at once in low whispers. My first reaction was confusion. No one else should have been inside the tower. Technicians logged their inspections, and I was the only one assigned to this turbine that day. Still, I called out. "Hello?" My voice echoed upward and downward through the hollow tower. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then the whispering stopped. Completely. The sudden quiet made the tower feel heavier somehow, like the air itself had thickened. I climbed the final few steps and opened the hatch into the nacelle compartment. The generator room smelled like warm metal and grease. Everything looked normal. The main rotor shaft is turning slowly. Control panels are blinking green. Nothing out of place, and no one was there. I finished the inspection quickly, maybe faster than usual. I checked the temperature readings, logged the vibration levels, and packed my tools. While I worked, I kept listening. The whispering didn't come back. By the time I climbed down and stepped outside, the sun was already low in the sky. The wind had picked up slightly. The turbine blades above me turned with slow, heavy rotations. I told myself the sounds were gustos. When passing through the tower structure, nothing unusual. But that night, something strange happened. When I reviewed the inspection recordings on my helmet camera, I heard the whispering again. The audio picked it up clearly, several voices, all speaking at once, but the words didn't make sense. It wasn't English, or Spanish, or any language I recognized. The strange part wasn't the language, it was the rhythm. The voices weren't talking normally. They sounded like they were repeating the same sentence over and over again. Soft, slow, almost like breathing. I replayed the audio 5 times. Each time, the whispering seemed clearer. And each time I noticed something new. The voices were not coming from above me. They were coming from below, from somewhere deeper inside the tower. The next morning, I told my supervisor. He laughed and said turbines make strange resonance sounds sometimes. Metal towers can amplify wind vibrations in weird ways. According to him, technicians often imagine voices after long shifts. Sleep deprivation can do strange things. Maybe he was right. Still, he asked me to inspect Turbine 17 again the following day, just to double-check everything. The second inspection started around 3 in the afternoon. The sky was gray this time, and the wind was stronger. From a distance, the turbines looked like slow-moving shadows against the clouds. When I reached number 17, I hesitated before unlocking the hatch. I'm not sure why. Nothing bad had actually happened, but something about the tower felt different now, like a place I had already disturbed. I opened the hatch and stepped inside. The temperature was colder than the previous day. Not dramatically cold, just enough to notice. The humming vibration felt stronger too. I closed the hatch and listened. At first there was nothing unusual. Then I heard it again. Whispering. This time it started almost immediately. Low voices moving through the hollow tower. I stood there at the bottom platform holding my flashlight. The sound didn't seem to come from one direction. It surrounded the entire tower, like the steel walls were carrying the voices upward. I told myself it was still just a wind resonance, but when I pointed my flashlight down toward the base floor, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Scratches, thin lines carved into the metal panel near the ladder. They looked random at first, but when I leaned closer, the scratches formed shapes, symbols, rows of them, dozens, carved into the steel. They weren't letters from any alphabet I recognized. Some looked like curved hooks, others like narrow triangles. They were arranged in long vertical lines, running around the inside of the tower, almost like someone had been writing on the metal walls. I ran my hand across the surface. The scratches felt old, not freshly carved, which meant they had probably been there before my first inspection. I wondered how I had missed them. That's when the whispering became louder, not louder in volume. Clearer, like the voices were slowly forming words. I couldn't understand the language, but the rhythm sounded familiar. It matched the pattern from the helmet camera recording. The same repeating phrase, over and over again, coming from below me and above me, inside the tower. I stood there for nearly a minute, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to leave immediately, but curiosity is a powerful thing, especially when you work around machines every day. You start believing everything has a mechanical explanation. So I started climbing the ladder again. Halfway up, the whispering stopped. Exactly like the previous day. Complete silence. No wind echoes. No voices. Just the turbine humming slowly above me. I finished the inspection again. Nothing unusual. Temperature normal. Gearbox stable. No mechanical problems. But when I climbed back down, something had changed. The scratches near the base floor were different. There were more of them. At least I think there were. Maybe I hadn't noticed the full pattern before. Maybe the lighting made it look different. Or maybe something else had happened. I still don't know. But that night, when I checked the helmet camera recording again, the whispering was louder than before. And this time I heard something else mixed into the voices. A sound that didn't belong to language. It sounded like breathing. Slow. Deep. Coming from somewhere very close to the microphone. I replayed that section again and again. The breathing lasted for almost 20 seconds, but during that time, I hadn't been breathing heavily in the recording. I had been standing still, listening, which meant the sound probably wasn't mine. The next day, the wind farm manager called me into his office. He asked if I had been inside Turbine 17 after my inspection. I said no. He showed me something on his tablet, security footage from the maintenance cameras. The video showed me exiting the turbine the previous afternoon, but after I walked away, the hatch door opened again. Slowly, from the inside, and someone climbed out. The figure looked exactly like me. Same helmet, same jacket, same tools, but I was already halfway down the service road when it happened. The second figure climbed out of the hatch, looked around the empty wind farm, and then slowly climbed back inside the tower. The hatch closed again. No one could explain what happened in that video. The vibration came back stronger the next morning. It started at exactly 9:12 a.m. while I was halfway up the ladder inside the turbine tower. At first, it felt normal, like the machine simply waking up, but then I heard something that made my hands freeze on the metal rung. The vibration carried a sound inside it, not a mechanical hum, not wind pressure, but a low, stretched whisper. It was the kind of sound you only notice when everything else is silent. I stopped climbing and held my breath. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the whisper came again, sliding through the hollow tower walls, like air speaking through a pipe. It sounded like a voice trapped inside the metal. Not loud enough to understand, but clear enough to know it wasn't machinery. And somehow it seemed to follow the rotation of the blades above. I told myself it was airflow. Wind passing through narrow sections can create strange harmonics. At least that is what I tried to believe. But the strange thing was the timing. Every few seconds, the whisper stopped completely. Then it returned exactly when the blades completed another rotation. I climbed the rest of the ladder slowly and reached the nacelle compartment. The inside smelled faintly like warm oil and metal dust. Everything looked normal on the control panel, yet the whisper followed me up there. This time, it was clearer, still distant, but layered like multiple voices overlapping. I turned off the turbine temporarily to run a diagnostic. When the blades slowed, the whisper stretched into something longer. And right before the blades stopped, it sounded almost like a word. I stood there staring at the ceiling panel. The tower below me echoed softly as the turbine settled into silence. For a moment, everything felt completely normal again. Then, the whisper came back, but the blades weren't moving anymore. That was the first moment. Real fear hit me. I walked to the hatch that led back down into the tower shaft. The hollow interior stretched hundreds of feet below like a vertical tunnel. And from somewhere deep down in that darkness, the whisper was rising upward. Not loud, not aggressive, just slowly climbing toward me through the metal walls. It sounded like breath moving through a giant pipe, but hidden inside that breath were fragments of voices. Broken pieces of words that I couldn't quite understand. My radio crackled suddenly. The dispatchee asked if everything was normal up there. For a second I almost told him about the voices, but I stopped myself. How do you explain that the wind turbine you're inspecting sounds like it's whispering? He would probably assume fatigue or microphone interference. Maybe he would even pull me off the project. So I simply said everything was fine. That was the moment I made the worst decision of that entire job. Instead of leaving the tower, I decided to investigate the sound. Curiosity can be stronger than fear sometimes. I turned on my headlamp and started climbing down the ladder slowly. The inside of the tower was dim and circular, the light from above fading quickly as I descended. Every few steps, the whisper grew slightly louder. It didn't echo the way normal sound echoes in metal shafts. Instead, it moved like wind, sliding along the inner surface of the tower. When I reached the halfway platform, the whisper stopped completely. The sudden silence felt heavier than the noise. I waited there listening. Then I heard something new. Footsteps. Not metal footsteps like mine on the ladder. These sounded soft, like someone walking on sand. The sound was coming from below me. My heart began to pound against my ribs. The tower was sealed except for the access door at the base, and that door required a coded key. No one was scheduled to be here except me. I leaned over the ladder opening and shined my light downward. The beam barely reached the bottom floor, far below. Nothing moved, but the footsteps continued. Slow. Patient, circling somewhere in the darkness. Then the whisper returned. This time it wasn't drifting randomly through the tower. It was rising straight toward me. The voices inside it overlapped again. Some sounded deeper. Some sounded thin and distant. And one of them suddenly sounded like it was saying a word. My name. I nearly slipped from the ladder. I told myself that wasn't possible. Wind can create strange sounds inside large structures. Your brain sometimes turns random noise into words. That's a known psychological effect. Maybe I was just exhausted. Still, the whisper said it again. My name. Not loudly. Just hidden inside the wind. For a long moment, I stayed frozen on the ladder. My mind was running through logical explanations, but something felt very wrong. The tower suddenly vibrated again, even though the turbine above was still turned off. The metal shell hummed faintly around me, and the whisper changed. It was no longer scattered voices. Now it sounded like dozens of people speaking quietly at the same time. All from below. I climbed down another 10 feet slowly. My headlamp beam widened as the base floor came into view. At first it looked empty. Then I noticed something strange. The dust on the floor had marks across it. Thin lines, like something had been dragged across the surface repeatedly. But they weren't random. They formed circles. Dozens of overlapping circles carved into the dust around the center of the tower. My stomach tightened. I didn't remember seeing those earlier when I first climbed up. The whisper suddenly grew louder, and this time I heard something clear. A sentence. Soft, broken, but unmistakably human. It sounded like someone whispering the same words again and again. Stay inside. My throat went dry. I turned around quickly and looked up the ladder toward the light far above. The whisper rose with me, and suddenly the turbine blades above began moving again. I knew that was impossible. The system was still locked in manual shutdown, but the tower started vibrating as if the turbine had restarted on its own. The whisper turned into a low, rushing roar, dozens of voices blending together inside the wind. And in that moment, I understood something that still makes my skin crawl today. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the tower walls. Like something had been trapped there for years. Something that only spoke when the wind passed through the turbine. I climbed upward faster, my boots slamming against the ladder rungs. The vibration grew stronger. The whispering voices grew louder. And as I reached the halfway platform again, I heard footsteps behind me on the ladder. Soft, careful, following my climb. I didn't look down. I just kept climbing. Because deep inside my chest, a terrifying thought had started forming. What if the voices inside the turbine weren't just echoes of wind? What if they were recorders? Fragments of sounds captured by the tower over time. Or worse, what if the tower had been listening for years, collecting every voice that had ever entered it, and somehow repeating them? By the time I reached the hatch at the top, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely open it. The whispering below me had turned into a chaotic storm of voices, dozens of people speaking at once. Some shouting, some begging, some laughing quietly. I slammed the hatch shut behind me and locked it. For several seconds I stood there gasping for breath. The nacelle was silent again. The turbine blades were still. The control panel showed no movement at all. Everything looked normal, but from the other side of the hatch, I heard one last sound. A single whisper, soft and close. Right against the metal door, it said something slowly. 3 words. Don't leave us. I shut down the entire turbine system and climbed down the exterior ladder instead of going back through the tower. The wind outside felt colder than before. I drove away from the wind farm without telling anyone what I heard that day. Later that night, I checked the maintenance records out of curiosity, and that's when I found something strange. 3 technicians had previously reported unusual acoustic phenomena inside that same turbine. All 3 reports were dismissed as wind resonance. 2 of those technicians eventually transferred to different sites. The 3rd one quit the company entirely. No explanation. Maybe stress played tricks on my mind. Or maybe some places carry things we simply don't understand. But one thing I believe with certainty is this. Everything happens by the will of Allah. Nothing moves Nothing changes, and nothing touches our lives without his knowledge. Everything happens according to Allah's will, and maybe some questions are not meant to be answered. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments, what do you think those voices inside the turbine really were? And if you enjoy dark stories like this one, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Unblinking. Share this story with someone who loves unsettling mysteries.